number 6. The following text is adapted from Jerome K. Jerome's 1889 novel, Three Men in a Boat, to say nothing of the dog. The narrator is traveling by boat with Harris and another friend. Harris told us anecdotes of how he had gone across the English Channel when it was so rough that the passengers had to be tied into their beds, and he and the captain were the only two living souls on board who were not ill. Sometimes it was he and the second mate who were not ill, but it was generally he and one other man. If not he and another man, then it was he by himself. So, which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? We need to find out the function of this last sentence. If not he and another man, then it was he by himself. Is it A, it indicates the reason for Harris's eagerness to resume traveling? B, it hints at Harris's feeling that during an earlier boat trip, others didn't include him in activities? C, it emphasizes that Harris always boasts about his own constitution when speaking of a previous boat trip. D, it reveals that although Harris claims to prefer solitary activities when traveling, he actually enjoys having company. So over here we can see that the narrator is traveling by boat with Harris and another friend, and Harris is telling anecdotes of how he had gone across the English Channel. So what he is telling, it was so rough that they had to be tied to their beds, and he is also talking about how they are getting sick. First he is mentioning he and the captain were the only two living souls on board who were not ill. Sometimes it was he and the second mate who were not ill, and it was generally he and another one man. If not he and another man, then it was he by himself, which means that Harris is never getting ill or something. It's always others who are getting ill. That's what we understand. So which should we select? So if you said C, well done, that is the correct answer. Because in choice C, it most accurately describes how the underlined sentence functions in the text as a whole. In the text, Harris tells stories about his previous boat trip across the English Channel, when conditions were so rough that others on board became seasick. According to the text, Harris's accounts vary somewhat but generally involve him and only one other man not growing ill. The underlined sentence then adds that if it was not Harris and another man who didn't develop seasickness, then it was Harris by himself. That is, some versions of the story even involve Harris being the only person on board who resisted seasickness. Therefore, the underlined sentence emphasizes that Harris always boasts about his own constitution or physical well-being when speaking of a previous boat trip. So he is boasting about his own health, that he never fell sick. And A is incorrect because the text doesn't portray Harris as being eager to resume traveling. There's nowhere it says that he is very eager to travel. Instead, it just shows Harris boasting of how he didn't become seasick on a previous boat trip when most or all of other people on board did. And choice B is incorrect because there's nothing in the text to suggest that Harris felt excluded from activities during an earlier boat trip. The text suggests that Harris experienced isolation during that trip because others on board had grown ill, not because Harris had wanted to join certain activities but felt left out. Okay, so it is not because of some activity, it is because they got sick, the others, according to him. So, and then choice D is also incorrect because the text doesn't portray Harris as either enjoying company or claiming to prefer solitude. The text suggests that Harris experienced some degree of isolation during a previous boat trip, but the reason provided by the text has nothing to do with a preference for either solitude or the opposite. Rather, the reason, according to Harris, is that most or all of the other people on board were sick. That's why he became solitary, in fact, in the last trip, as per him. So